Hello everyone. We still have just over a minute before we start, so I will come back in a minute and we'll actually start the webinar. I'll just give a few minutes for everyone to join. Thank you. Okay, before we begin, I'd like to point out that all the participants are on mute for a better experience so that you have a chance to hear me. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available at a later date. Please use the question panel on the right hand side to ask any questions, and Bruce will kindly answer these as we go along. Handouts are also available on the right hand side of the panel. Please help yourself. A webinar feedback survey will be sent to you after the presentation ends. Please complete the feedback, and this will let me know that you require a certificate to be sent to you, telling me that you need a certificate for continuing professional development. Please also register for future webinars at blatchford.co.uk/webinars, where we are listing the ongoing range of webinars as we add to them constantly. Finally, any questions, please feel free afterwards to send me an email. My email is john.ross@blatchford.co.uk. So today's is the Linx overview webinar, presented by myself, John Ross. I'm the Principal Prosthetist and Commercial Manager for Blatchford. I've been a prosthetist now for over 27 years, and I'm still a clinician. So I work here in London when not traveling around the world. I'm also aided today by Paul, who's one of my patients. I make his sockets, and he is a Linx user. So in a second, Paul will give you a quick word. I've been involved in the development of the Linx since it started, both in the R&D side and testing, and so have a large background knowledge in using this part. And Paul was actually one of our first test patients. So Paul, would you like to say a few words?
Hello. Hi everybody. Yeah, my name is Paul Efayena. I started using Blatchford products many years ago, when it was back in 2000 and actually it was 2010. So back in 2010, didn't know it so long ago. When I started on a KX06 mechanical niche, that was my first knee I ever tried. And yeah, so the KX06 for me was quite, I had nothing to go by, but I did find, looking back, I found it quite a difficult knee. I think, you know, starting out as an amputee, I found it hard to use. I found it unstable at times. It wasn't you couldn't rely on it. It wasn't consistent, you know. Going downstairs, for example, if you didn't land on the exact sweet spot on the foot, then it may just go on you. You end up falling down the stairs or something. So, you know, after a few maybe touchy events, I ended up with the KX06 going down the stairs, step over step, you know, so it's not to risk falling down or something. Also, the other thing with the KX06 was that I noticed over time I started getting backache, which I didn't know what was causing it. As now later on as an amputee, I began to realize is because obviously you don't have the moving ankle, you know, so and you have like a fixed foot, so too much powering over the toes and everything else resulted in like back trouble and everything, which also then made your walkable distance a lot less, you know, so you didn't walk as far as you possibly could because it was just too painful. But I think my prosthetist at the time identified that I was like a high user of my prosthesis, that I like to get up and go and get out as much as I could. And he suggested that I trialed the Orion 1 at the time. And I trialed the Orion 1. I came in on a Friday to have it fitted. And on the Sunday of that week, so a day and 2 days later, I entered a charity walk, which I entered beforehand. Tunnel to Towers was the name of the organisation, and it's a 5 kilometre walk for amputees. And from walking maybe 100 metres or even less, with the new Orion, I was able to walk and do a 5K walk without no real training or nothing else really. Just put the knee on. I was okay, felt okay. Did a walk around Bowley Close, see if I could adjust to it. And on Sunday, I did a 5K walk. So that was a really good transition. You know, it made a huge difference to my back and everything, and it made walking easier with the moving ankle. The only issue was when you stopped and stood still, you constantly trying to stay standing still, basically holding your leg back, and so the knee won't yield when you sort of bend. So I find that every time I sort of stood having a conversation and stopped to have a conversation, it took a couple on me after a while. Not long after my usage with the Orion, I was again asked to be one of the guys who could help trialing the Linx. So that was the first prosthetic, all-in-one prosthetic where you have communication between the foot and the knee, so they both know what each other's doing at any given point in time. So if you're going down a hill, it helps you to yield. It understands you're going down a hill. Going up a hill, it assists you, you know, in the foot to make the hill. I think it's harder to give you a bit more lift when you're going up the hill. But every minute, if you're walking down a gentle slope, it again applies some sort of resistance to stop you kind of going down the slope too quickly, which you would normally do if you had no resistance on the knee. So yeah, I found that, you know, transitioning from the Orion to the Linx kind of solved all the problems that I found with the Orion. You know, I wake up early every day and I go to sleep very late, so I'm on my leg all the time. I train every day, so I go to the gym, I lift heavy weights, I'm up and down stairs, I'm in the supermarkets with my shopping, lots of bags of shopping. There's nothing I don't really do. I have my son, I'm carrying my son around all the time. I'm in and out of the soft plays, climbing through the kiddies climbing frames and everything with my leg on. So yeah, it's to me, it's proven to be a really kind of capable limb to use. Yeah, so I think I'm 2012. So I think it was about 2014, I think. I can't remember exactly. I think time's flown by, but I've been using it since 2014 in the very beginning. And I think the only issues I've noticed with the limb was in the beginning when we were kind of finding out what in the programming phase before it was released, finding out what could be improved and little things like getting in and out of your car. And we had an issue with the actual standing lock would come on while you're sitting in the car because you're not moving, and I think they had to write a program to get around that so it doesn't lock up when you're sitting in the car, so you can actually get out, and things like that. And there's probably play around with the fluids and the hydraulics to find which gave you the best kind of resistance and which allowed the most fluid movement of the knee and things like that. So yeah, but I'm still using it today. You know, so and I'm still got no complaints really. So, and I've not been able to break it yet. So, what else to say? It's like again, like I think the only other things I've said in the past is that when you, unlike in the Orion, when I had the KX06, you had to think about your day. I think where you're going, what the terrain was like, how long you're going to be on the limb. Everything was stressful just thinking about your day and whether you could handle it or not. The Orion took a large percentage of that away, but it still kind of left you with, you still had to think about stuff like even just standing and talking. If you were at a conference or you're going somewhere, you're going to be out. Like, I still like to go out partying or go out to a club or something. So I know if I'm in a club with the Orion on, it's going to be hard work because I'm going to be standing up trying to focus on keeping my legs straight all evening, which is I might as well go home. Again, when I've got the links on, I just go out. So yeah, so it's kind of like an all-rounder. It's good for me. It's good for my training. It's good for looking after my son, going shopping, and just days out. So I don't think there's much more I can add to it, really.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you.
That's okay.
Okay, so after that introduction, we'll start moving on. So the links and overview. So this webinar today will be on the world's first fully integrated microprocessor limb. So firstly, what is Linx not? The Linx is not just a microprocessor needing a microprocessor for sharing a battery. This has been made available by other suppliers, but ours, the difference is, yes, we do share a battery, but we also supply and share information. So there's information from the knee, information from the ankle, and information from the foot are all shared, as well as having that common supply. And the Linx is a fully integrated microprocessor system. Okay, as I said, it's processing the data from the knee, foot, ankle in real time, so that it's always looking to make the patient as safe as possible and keep them stable. Okay, so we don't want the patient falling down, because we want to encourage confidence in the use of the limb, so that the patient feels that they can do as much as possible without having to think about what's going on around them. And we do know that one of the reasons that patients get tired is because they're using so much of their cognitive ability, or so much thought is going into, am I safe to walk? What's the ground like? How am I going to get around an obstacle? Okay, so what we do is we just want them to be able to think about this. And by collecting the data from the knee, foot and ankle in real time, and then adjusting the overall function of the limb, we're doing this. And this is actually as our own legs work. So we don't think about, how does my knee function? How does my ankle function? How does the foot function? We expect it all to work in parallel with each other, so they're all doing their own things in their own time to keep us safe and allowing us to perform the maximum number of tasks. So the design philosophy to start off with was really to follow the idea of biomimetic design, in that we are trying to copy the normal human musculoskeletal system. And if we think of our legs, we have muscles that go over multiple joints and then give a combined control over different joints to allow us to walk in as natural pattern as possible. Okay, and this is what the rope links is doing. We're actually using that microprocessor control to synchronize the movement, whether it be flexion or extension, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion of the joints, all at the same time, to keep the patient safe, comfortable and secure, while making walking as tireless and energy efficient as possible for the amputees. And this is where we came up when we were starting to design the Linx. So as I mentioned before, the Linx is the world's first fully integrated lower limb system, okay? And that we're not just sharing a battery power, we're sharing far more. Looking onto it, so the Linx, the ankle unit was based on the world's first microprocessed control hydraulic ankle, okay? And at the time of the development of this in 2014, as Paul got it correct, into 2015, we had about 5,000 land wearers worldwide, okay? And we found out the bits that were good for them, both as transtibial and transfemoral amputees, and then looked to see what we could build on to this to actually improve the system for the transfemoral users. At that point, someone already launched a microprocessor limb which was sharing battery power for a knee and ankle, although their unit didn't talk to each other. So at this point, we had time to then spend additional research development time looking at what we could do to improve this. And from this, we come up with the active resistance control, okay, which allows real-time optimization of plant flexion and dorsiflexion resistance during gait, and also controlling stance flexion, stance yield, and flexion extension of the knee during swing phase. Getting back onto the ankle, it was tried and tested technology. Okay, we know there's a lot of research about hydraulic ankles. We've already shown a lot of this in earlier webinars, that the hydraulic ankles give us a more symmetrical gait. Okay, it's been proven that hydraulic ankles will actually give you a more symmetrical gait for transfemoral amputees by allowing a more natural swing. We see that the hydraulic ankles, because the way they can adjust plant flexion and dorsiflexion, will make it easier for an amputee to walk up and down slopes. And we then use this information for walking up and down slopes from the ankle, and we built onto it with the knee joint to give us additional functions for the user. Finally, there was work done by Louise Johnson, a physiotherapist, which looked at dorsiflexion during swing, and she showed that for transfemoral amputees, hydraulic ankles actually increased toe clearance for the amputee while they're walking, no matter what they're doing, such that the patient had less chance of catching the foot, tripping, or falling. So the technology we now currently have, as I said before, the Linx is a complete limb. We have a single lithium-ion battery pack that's right at the top of the knee, okay, bringing the weight as proximal as possible. Means by keeping the weight close to the knee, patients don't feel it as much. We have 4 central processing units which are controlling the knee, the ankle, the foot, and then another central processing unit, the final one, which is taking information from everywhere else and then working out what the patient's doing. Okay, it's a complete system. The Linx is, there's only one option. Okay, you can't have a Linx and have a different foot. For example, we need the information from that foot and ankle to actually control what's going on, because we need to be able to take sensory information from this to the knee to give us the final control. In that sense, one central controller is what does this. It's taking information constantly from everywhere else and then comparing it, so that you don't have a point, for example, where your patient is standing with weight in the foot is dorsiflexion, and then the knee wants to switch off and then go into free flexion. Okay, we want to keep the patient as safe as possible. The Linx uses a single power pack, so this gives us 250% increased power capacity, as opposed to just using a microprocessed knee and the Elan foot. Okay, so we can actually have it lasting longer. Paul typically gets 3 and a bit days of charge from his knee. If you go onto the American Amputee Coalition website, you will see, though, that there's patients on there who are talking about getting 5 days or so from this, from these batteries, and we'll talk about that later on. The other advantage we have here is by having a single limb, okay, integrated limb, we have 1 charging point. So it cuts down the number of charging points you need. You've got charging point for your mobile phone at night, 1 for your knee, 1 for your ankle, 1 for your notepad, etc. It's going on and on and on. Now we just have a single charging point which does in complete limb. Okay. So getting back onto it, we have 1 power pack. Okay, it's a single charging point, and we have recently moved to a magnetic charger. It makes it easy to connect, especially late at night for some of our users, and it means your eyesight doesn't have to be as good as well. The limb will go into a low power mode during an activity. So if you're sitting there, you're going to bed, the legs lying aside, it'll go to a low power mode, but it will still switch itself on at regular intervals to detect what's happening. So that's it. But even with that, during this low power sleep mode, you're still going to get typically 3 days plus of battery life. Charging will take between 6 and 8 hours completely. So it's an overnight charge, I normally say plug the leg in before you go to bed. When you get up the next day, it's fine. I know that Paul typically charges his most nights because he uses a mobile phone, and his mobile phone has to be charged most days. Believe me, he's constantly on his phone. To get extra use, we have an on-off switch. Point number 2 in this slide, you can actually switch the knee off. This comes in handy if you have someone who's going away camping or somewhere where they won't be able to charge the knee. So at night, when they take the leg off, go to sleep, they can switch the power off. And this is the reason that some amputees are getting 5, occasionally 6 days of use from the knee, because they're switching the entire Linx limb off. So the knee's switched off, the ankle, the foot, everything's switched off. There's no power whatsoever being used. And as I say, we have instances of people getting 5 or 6 days, which is long enough to go camping over a long weekend with. As I've already mentioned, charging will take between 6 and 8 hours. Okay, and that is from fully dead. Okay, if you've got no power whatsoever on it, you can recharge it fully between 6 and 8 hours. We have a rapid charge, so when you first start charging it, it will charge and get you half a day's use within 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what your power supply. The unit must be switched on to charge. This is to meet FDA flight regulations. Any of you have been on a plane, you'll know that if you want to charge your mobile or your notebook, iPad, whatever, it has to be switched on for it to strictly charge. So this is the same with this, again, to meet flight regulations. If you switch the unit off, you can switch it off and back on again, wait for 20 seconds and it'll do a reset. This is a calibration mode where it will go through all. I've got to be honest and say Paul never does this. Paul never switches his knee off, but that's just him. One of our earlier systems for our microprocessed limbs, the users, the amputees who are actually wearing the limb, asked if we could make a simple way where they could determine how much battery power was left on their leg. So when the leg is switched on, in the function mode, all the patient has to do is press the minus button at the back of the knee. By pressing and holding the minus button, we will actually get a battery charge indicator, which is an LED that's stuck between the 2 buttons. This will give you a group of flashes going from 3 rapid green flashes, which means it's fully charged and you've got the best part of 3 days of use, going down to a red, which is a very slow flash, which tells you the unit's pretty much dead. You're on residual power. Low battery warning kicks in at 15%. Okay, so you've typically got half a day of battery life left when you get the first low battery warning. So you get 5 long beeps. However, should you carry on for whatever reason and the patient can't manage to get the leg to charge, what will happen is the ankle will revert to the standard walking setting. Okay, so in effect it turns into an echelon hydraulic ankle. So you will still have a plantar flexion and dorsiflexion resistance for it. The knee will go to a high resistance, a high yield resistance, so that the patient can still walk safely. However, it won't release into swing properly, so they have very limited heel rise or flexion in the knee. We don't go to a totally locked knee because we know that if the knee goes totally locked and the patient does have to get into a car or onto a bus and they can't get the knee to flex, it's very difficult to manage to move about. So we will allow them to actually force the knee into a flexible position so they can sit down, even if there's no charge. So here we can see charge. We now use a simple magnetic charger. It plugs in on the Orion 3 and the Linx, and will charge the knee, making them much easier, especially at night, or someone with poor eyesight, or maybe even manual dexterity problems. This magnetic charger makes things much easier. So we've taken a modular design. We have a knee, microprocessed knee, microprocessed ankle and foot. We have a pylon. We actually have the connection cable, which takes battery power and also takes information from the knee, ankle and foot, and allows information to run backwards and forwards. We actually have this running inside the pylon. So the pylon actually protects that cable and reduces the chance of the patient damaging it, either by disconnecting the two parts accidentally or shearing the cable. Okay, so this protects that cable. Also, by moving the batteries up to the knee, we have a higher sense of gravity, which makes the limb feel lighter than it actually is. So whereas a limb weighs slightly less than a microprocessed knee with a microprocessed foot, moving the batteries to that proximal position means that actually the patient feels it's much lighter. I mentioned before that we have real-time measurement from both the knee, the foot and ankle, and these are compared by the central control system. So all that information from the knee, the ankle and foot is fed back, and then the central control system decides what the patient's doing, whether it be standing. I know a patient who is a doctor who said that he didn't know why, but when he was wandering around the hospital, it seemed that every nurse or doctor who wanted to stop him always insisted on stopping him when he was standing on a ramp. So now we have a dedicated standing mode where the foot can be flexed or extended. The foot can be dorsiflexed or plantarflexed, and the knee can be fully extended or slightly flexed, and it will support the weight. The unit will then change for the patient starting up, and it will also change the functions for stopping. So we can change how the ankle and the knee, they function depending on where the patient's speeding up or slowing down. We have a sitting resistance, so the patient can sit with aided resistance. This allows them to offload some of the forces through their sound limb and actually reduces the chance of injury later on. And the other big one I should mention at this point is also ramp detection. We can change how the knee functions, both for walking up and down a ramp and also for the steepness of that ramp, because the ankle helps us determine how steep the ramp the patient's on, so we can have different settings for different ramps, meaning the patient does not have to compromise. So moving on to the key functions, standing mode. I'm going to come on to this a bit more further. Progressive ramp modes for up and down. We can change how the foot and the ankle functions, and also how the knee responds to these ramps. Sitting, stairs and steep ramp mode, as you would expect on any microprocessed knee with a microprocessed foot attached, you would have dedicated modes for these. We have a stumble control recovery, which helps the patient get time to get their sound leg down to stop them falling. We have user modes, which can be set up for the individual patient and depending on what they're looking for. We have proven energy efficient multi-speed walking, and I'll come back to this later on, where we can actually save energy for the amputee walking and allow them to walk faster. Stability and security at all times, which is the main reason in the world for supplying a microprocessed limb. And then battery and power life and a save and restore. Standing lock, this is one of the things we were first involved in 2014 and trying to work off this. On a standing lock, what happens is the knee goes totally locked. Okay, so the knee will lock, whether it be the patient has the knee fully extended, or as you can see in the lower diagram here, the patient actually has the knee flexed. Okay, so it will lock and support their weight. This is one of the things that we also do for Paul. He has the knee set so that when the knee's flexed, it will support his full weight on it. This allows an even distribution and reduces pressure on the lower back, because they know there's no tendency for that knee to yield or move under them. However, during the trials, what we found was that the patients actually said that they preferred controlled motion. Okay. What we thought initially was that if we made the knee lock and the foot and ankle lock, so it was just a peg, a locked unit below the patient would feel more secure. However, during trials and testing, the patients come back and said that they actually preferred some natural movement at the ankle, similar to an able-bodied person, where when we stand, whether it be on a slope or on a flat, we actually rock gently backwards and forwards on our foot and ankle. So we built that into the limb as well. So there is some controlled motion at the ankle, albeit on a very high yield. So when the foot is either at neutral, dorsiflex or plantarflex, that ankle will go to a high resistance with a locked knee, and it will allow the patient to gently rock their weight backwards and forwards. This encourages more even weight distribution, which actually has been shown to reduce the socket interface pressures, so making the socket more comfortable for the user. One other big advantage we found of this is, especially in bilateral amputees, by having this small amount of movement of the ankle when standing, even if someone does knock into them with a reasonable amount of force, there's a better chance of the patient being able to save themselves and not fall or stumble. Ramp modes, the Linx immediately detects with the ramp. We don't have to worry about taking so many steps, etc. It detects you're on a ramp. And the ankle and foot actually will help determine how steep that ramp is. So we can actually change the plantar flexion and dorsiflexion resistances on the foot to make it harder to walk down a hill, or to make it easier to walk up, depending on what's needed. And also we can change the resistances at the knee, again, to make it harder or easier for the patient to walk up and down a ramp. And this can be set to their own preference. It's not a preconceived thing. You can easily overwrite it. So this gives us this enhanced ramp mode. Enhanced ramp mode will actually let us determine whether the patient's working on a shallow ramp, say a wheelchair access ramp, or if they're walking on a very steep ramp. And at this point, we can actually change how the leg walks. So for example, on a very shallow ramp, the patient may want to walk at a very normal speed, not much slower than you walk when walking the flat. But as the ramp increases in angle and incline, then you may want to then start changing it. And this is what the Linx is doing. It's looking for what's happening at the knee, at the foot and ankle, and then adjusting itself to make you stable without having to compromise by walking down a steep ramp at high resistance, but then also having to use the same high resistances when walking down something very shallow. Additionally, it changes in real time because the ramps are not uniform in the real world. So the angle of the incline or decline will change constantly over the duration of a ramp. So it's always looking for this and then changing the resistances to maximize the patient's ability to walk. And what we've seen from this is that evidence is shown for the Linx that actually it improves walking for the amputee. Okay, so what we see is an increased involvement in the prosthetic limb. Okay, so in one study, what they were looking at was the amputee's ability to walk down ramps, starting and stopping. Okay, what we saw was that the patient could actually increase the loading on the prosthetic limb by 15%. So that is less work being required on the sound limb, on the sound side. Okay, so that the patient's not having to do so much work. And they saw an increase in any absorption of between 14 and 16%, all of which would lead to you thinking that the amputee would be more energy efficient, have a reduced chance of degenerative joint disease on the sound limb because they're managing to do more prosthetic limb, and the increased energy absorption would again lead to you having greater socket comfort. So taking the information from that study, what we found is we saw an 8% reduction in hip power needed. So this would save energy. This is 8% less effort the amputees have to put into it. We saw a 23% increase in the braking impulse, which means that the amputee is not going to have to work so hard to walk slowly. They can actually walk at whatever speed they want to. I'm sure many of us have saw transfer amputees on mechanical limbs, especially when they get to very steep ramps. They get faster and faster than down that ramp because they can't control it. On the Linx, because the foot and ankle will adjust and the knee will adjust, we can turn the entire limb into a brake, and this will slow the patient's descent off it. Okay, so we slow their descent of the ramp, and this saves them energy and makes them more confident and less likely to fall. So here we see Paul, uneven terrain, walking down hills, and he can stop anywhere. He doesn't have to think about it, which is one of the things he always comments about, is the fact that he can stop no matter what. If his child runs in front of him, he doesn't have to think, am I safe to stop? He just stops. Grant is a teacher, he has to make sure he doesn't trod over any children, but also when he's walking down stairs and steep slopes, the unit determines what's going on and then reacts to him. He doesn't have to react to the limb. So it's always adjusting itself depending on whether those ramps are uniform height, different heights, different widths, and also the angle of the slope, constantly changing to make him as safe as possible. For walking downstairs and the steep slow modes, what it's doing is looking for no toe load. At this point, the knee will default to the highest yield resistance, which resists flexion of the knee while weights on it. This resistance is customizable to the patients and will depend on patient's weight, the length of the residuum, and can be adjusted. There's different levels of deep yield we have there. Starting off, if you wanted to, you could switch it all off so that it just yields like a mechanical leg, and then you can start increasing it and giving the patient a larger flexion angle of support. So this means it's very secure for patients of all different activity levels. They don't all have to be as fit as Paul and Grant. We have an enhanced stumble recovery. This is smarter and quicker in response than just a simple microprocess knee. As I say, because we have that additional set of sensors coming from the foot and ankle, we can actually determine closer what the limb is doing and then react. So in the Linx, if we detect an abnormal step, either from the foot and ankle or from the knee or a combination of both, what we can do is change the resistances to give the patient time to either A, control it, or B, get their sound limb down. Okay. One of the doctors I've worked with said to me that the best way to tell if a microprocessed limb is working well for an amputee is that the patient doesn't notice it. So the leg should be changing speeds, changing functions, and they don't notice it. They don't feel about it. They don't have to do anything specifically to get it to walk. Moving on to energy efficient multi-speed walking. The Linx uses our unique hybrid system of the knee, in that we have both hydraulic and pneumatic controls of the knee. So during swing phase, the limb is controlled by the pneumatics. Knee flexion varies according to walking speed. Many microprocessed knees look for a set knee flexion angle and then change the response of the limb depending on that. The Linx doesn't do that. We let the knee flexion mimic that of the sound limb. So the pneumatics is controlling the heel rise, and then the leg can come forward. So we see a copying of natural heel rising according to the cadence of the patient, and they don't have to think about it. And as I mentioned before, pneumatics have a long, well-documented history of energy saving for amputees. Depending on the study you read at, then you're going to save somewhere between 15 and 25%. The most common reason for supplying a microprocessed limb is for stability and security. Patients who feel confident that they can walk will walk. So the more we can allow the patient to feel confident over all terrains and for that limb to be stable and safe for them, then the more likely that patient is to use the limb and keep active. The more active a patient, the better their involvement in society. So by making sure the leg is stable and secure at all times for them, taking information from the knee, foot and ankle, we can actually make sure that patient is as safe as possible. Currently, we have 2 user modes available. We don't need a fob or a controller or anything. You don't need your mobile phone. We have 2 buttons at the back of the leg, a minus and plus button. You use these buttons to control the leg. So we have 2 user modes that are available from pressing on the back of the knee. Fixed flexion lock. At this point, you would program the angle that the knee will allow the patient to go to. So it may be that you have 15, say 20 degrees of flexion, and you might want the lead to go from fully extended to that angle. That might be handy for golf. Or as you see in the video here, the picture here, Paul planking. At this point, you want the fixed flexion lock to be at 0, so that the knee is totally straight for when you do push-ups, etc. Additionally, we have a cycling mode where the knee has no resistance, and the patient can actually switch on to cycling mode, cycle off, and then at the end of it, all they do is hold a button to switch it back off. As I say, the links, the user modes, are controlled by pressing the minus button. If you have the knee extended and then press the minus button 3 times in rapid succession, you will get into a flexion lock. Okay. This can be, as I say, flexed to a preset angle, which we program, or it can be totally straight. Similarly for cycling, you press it 4 times and it goes into cycling mode. Both modes are by default deactivated. This is so that we can ensure that the clinician who sets the leg up will actually explain to the user what these modes are for. So while you're in the program mode, you have to enable these to be used by the user, and then you got to program them. Okay, so you switch on, you go to the knee, you go to user modes. As a clinician, before the patient leaves the building, you enable either the fixed flexion lock and then set it to an angle the patient's going to use, or the cycling mode, you enable that so the patient can get the cycling on and off. No matter which one it is, to deactivate the modes and get the leg back to normal function, all you do is press and hold the minus button until the leg beeps, and then you're ready to go. In this case, pulse it on, press it 3 times. He's got his fixed flexion on for working in the gym, teaching someone at the gym, so he's doing his exercises. And then at the end of it, when he comes off the machines or whatever, he just presses and holds that minus button. He's back onto normal function and ready to walk off. There's a raft of clinical evidence available to support the use of the links for our amputees. We have been shown that we can improve stability by reducing the risk of trips and falls. This, as I keep on mentioning, will improve the patient's confidence and therefore improve their use of them. Improve balance, especially in slopes, uneven ground. The leg will self-align to the underlying terrain and allow the patient to spread their weight much more evenly. So this should reduce overuse of the sound limb and damage to the foot and ankle complex in that limb over time. The way the limb works and responds to different angles of slopes and different walking speeds and different terrains has been shown to reduce the socket pressures, especially when the patient has to walk up and down ramps or change shoes and things. The even limb loading, keeping your weight more evenly and not just relying on your sound limb, will reduce long-term limb disease. Here we go, greater energy efficiency, I said before, 15 to 25%, depending on the study you read. And here we're talking about 17% reduction in energy cost and a faster self-selected walking speed. Okay. And we know from the studies done in the United States and New York School that people who are ill walk slowly. People who are very ill walk very slowly. The faster someone typically walks, the greater their life expectancy. So we can let the patients feel confident and comfortable to walk faster. It will improve their overall general health and lead to a longer life expectancy for them. And we've had successful applications of both unilateral and bilateral transfemoral amputees, and we've even used this limb system on hip disc articulations and got good results. So the patient benefits, I mentioned already, we have a more symmetrical limb loading. So the patient feels that they can keep closer to 50% of their weight on the limb. For their health, we see 20% less energy used in slopes and 12% less energy used in walking the flats. Typically, we see an 8% increase in walking speed, self-selected walking speed for these amputees. So once they've had the leg and they've been using it for a month or so, they will typically want to walk faster than they did before. We see an improvement in standing balance for them. We see a 17% reduction in the sound limb loading. This means it will keep their sound limb in a healthier condition for a longer period of time. It's been shown that using these hydraulic ankles will give you a 60% reduction in socket pressure, because of the way they adapt to uneven terrain, as I say, inclines and declines. And finally, the key one here, that 18% greater toe clearance means that there's less chance of the patient catching the foot as they walk. Feedback from the users, smoother walk. I've already mentioned this, because the batteries have been moved proximally right to the top of the leg. It typically feels lighter. Standing mode, which Paul mentioned, so it relieves the sound pressure, and then they have less pressure on the lower back because they can keep their weight more evenly spread. And because even in standing mode, because the ankle allows a small amount of movement, it means that they can shift their weight between one leg and the other. Okay, all of this is going to reduce low back pain for them. Ramp mode is variable, and it is variable depending not only on whether you're climbing a hill or walking down a hill, but also the angle of the incline. Patient profile, ideal candidates, K3 ambulators, okay, who wants a limb that's an everyday prosthesis. Somebody who encounters uneven terrain, really it's not the kind of limb for someone who's housebound. They're not going to get all the benefits of the functionless. You also need 470 millimeters minimum build height clearance from the end of the adapter on the socket to the floor, okay, just because of the physical size of the components, with the knee, the foot, and the minimum cut length you can have of the pylon. So you need that 470 millimeters. It's not intended for people who want to sprint. If you're going to be partaking in the Paralympics, running a marathon, there's better limb systems out there for you than this. This is intended for normal activities, normal life, getting out and walking, doing things. It's also not recommended for people with water activities, where this will be used as a daily prosthesis. Okay, the unit is not submersible in water. And as an example, people who are not prepared to charge it. We have a technician who works with us who just won't charge a leg. So if you have someone who, for whatever reason, is not going to be prepared to charge the artificial limb, then there's no point supplying a microprocessed limb. The unit weighs 2.6 kilograms, okay, so is equivalent of a microprocessed knee with a modern microprocessed foot, and it has a maximum user weight of 125 kilograms. When we begin to fit the limb, okay, what we want to do is fit it in the shoe at a maximum plant flexion angle. We will supply a wedge that you can ask for every time you order a hydraulic foot from us. This goes underneath the shoe and then allows you to use your plumb bob, laser line, or whatever system you want to use to be able to bench align it. So align the foot as normal, so that and the knee so that it passes 0 to 10 millimeters in front of the knee center. Programming the limb is via Bluetooth. Okay, it's fast and simple. We've been making microprocess limb knees now for well over 20 years, and our latest version of it is programmed using the iOS app and takes approximately 3 minutes. A new user programmed straight out of the box would probably take you 15 to 20 steps. However, if you have someone like Paul who's used it for a while, you can actually get this down to 13 steps to get the programming from start to finish. Okay. We also have a fine-tune option, as you can see here, which allows you to go back in and start fine-tuning the unit for the user. What I would normally do is do a basic program. This will allow the patient to walk down steps, up and down ramps, stop, stand and stop comes on. They can do pretty much everything, and then carry on from there. So the patient can do that and then come back in and see if you need to fine tune. Moving on to questions. Okay, what happens if the links oops. Okay, common question, what happens if the battery dies? Okay, sorry. So I think I already mentioned this, but if the Linx has no battery power, what will happen is that the ankle will default as an echelon. So the ankle will go to whatever plantar flexion and dorsiflexion resistance the patient has for normal walking. The knee will go to a very high yield. Okay, so this will be more than enough to support the patient in walking, but is not a complete lock. This means that the reason for this is if the patient has forgot to charge it and has still got to get somewhere to charge it again, they can actually force the knee to flex for them so they can sit in a car or a bus. Okay, so it goes to a very high resistance. There will, however, be no clean release to stance phase, so the patient will have to be aware that they will have limited heel rise during this. Okay. However, as I say, the battery normally lasts 3 days, longer if the patient switches it on and off, and it doesn't care if you overcharge it. So you can charge it, as I say, like Paul, every day, every second day, or you can wait longer, depending on what suits your patient. Is it heavy? The limb does weigh 2.6 kilograms, as I've already mentioned. However, that weight is focused proximally due to the design of the unit. The Linx is an inclusive unit, so there's no additional pylons. This is the complete weight. And if you were to calculate the weight of a microprocess knee and a microprocess foot from most suppliers, and then add on the adapters, etc., to connect the knee and foot together, you're going to end up with a similar or greater weight. But we have the advantage that because most of our weight is proximal or close to the socket, then the actual effective weight that's felt by the amputee is typically less. The Linx does come with a cosmetic cover. All Linx and Orion 3s are microprocess knee come with a simple wraparound black protective cover. This is designed to be removable by the amputee so they can take it on and off depending on what they're doing. The advantage of this cover is not only does it help protecting the knee, it actually increases the knee width, so it makes it easier for the amputee to kneel down on. And it still gives you easy access to the charging points, the control buttons, plus minus button for using the knee, and the on-off switch. To aid you, the clinician, in choosing the Linx, we have a website which gives you greater detail. Please go to the website and review the additional information that's available in Linx. We have a clinical compendium. This is a summary of scientific evidence that has been submitted around the world. So what we've done is we've taken independent scientific evidence from a group of authors and then summarized it just to save you having to read through 200-300 pages of scientific data. We've reduced each data set to a single page. Okay, it just means it's much quicker for us and it saves us having to trawl through the internet for hours. Additionally, we have white papers. These white papers were written to be a simplified version of the clinical compendium. So we've taken the information from the clinical compendium and wrote something that is much simpler and easier to understand so that our users, the amputees themselves, can follow it. But also makes it handy if you have to supply the information to non-prosthetists, non-engineers, even your funding bodies, because it just simplifies the key points in a short and succinct formats with pictures to make it easier for people to follow. Finally, in conclusion, the amputee benefits of the Linx. We're looking for increased safety. Okay, we're going to increase the total clearance for the amputees. This has been proven will reduce the chance of stumbling, catching the toe and falling. We have enhanced stumble recovery and a hydraulic stand support, which are all responsive in real time to what the amputee is doing. We reduce the effort of the amputee because we have a pneumatic swing phase control, which has been proven to be more energy efficient than the hydraulic swing phase control. We don't look for a uniform heel rise. We let the heel rise match the sound limb so the patient's more natural. And we have a hydraulic ankle which adapts to the underlying ground. The improved gait, I've gone through these in odd option. Improved gait, self-aligning hydraulic ankle will adapt to the ground so the patient can stand there with their weight evenly balanced, whether they're standing facing up a ramp or down a ramp. And the hydraulic cylinder and hybrid pneumatic cylinder for swing stance control allows us to mimic the natural knee flexion extension of the sound limb, okay, as opposed to using preset angles that the leg is looking for. The combination of the ankle and the knee and the way that they change the resistances depending what the patient does reduces the compensatory activities for the amputee. And all that's finally leads to reduced strain on the rest of the body. I think as Paul already mentioned in his introduction, he has less back pain. The leg is doing more for him and he's not having to think about it. He doesn't have to think about what he's walking on. He doesn't have to concentrate so much. Finally, it's up to me to thank you for your time on behalf of myself and my user, Paul. Please don't forget to complete the feedback in the follow-up email that will come to you. And if there's anything you would like us to present in the future, please put down any suggestions you have there. Also, please register for the ongoing section of webinars. These can be found at blatchford.co.uk/webinars. So please register for ongoing webinars. And finally, there's more resources for us, the professionals, clinicians, at blatchford.co.uk/prosthetics/professionals. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time. Please feel free to connect with us. And as I said, if you have any questions after this, please feel free to email me.